Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Gritty Glitter Badger podcast. I'm your host, Krista, and this is the podcast where sport, fitness, mindset, and real talk collide. And today I want to dive into something that's been echoing through generations. I actually was listening to a podcast, and this was one of the things that was talked about, and it made me, really made me take pause, and I was very curious, and I started to think all of these things, and it's something that's been whispered on deathbeds across centuries, and that is regret. The number one regret of the dying isn't about money, status, or even missed opportunities. It's that they wished they had the courage to live a life true to themselves, not the life others expected of them, or, what people thought they should have been or should have done, or who they should have, they needed to be, right? And here's the kicker. So many of those same people have spent their living years criticizing or ridiculing, the very ones who did have the courage to live what their life true to who they, to themselves, like to who they truly were, right? And that got me to thinking, it's like, why do we do this? Why do we discourage what we secretly want? Something that, is the biggest regret that we have when we come to that point in life. And more importantly, how do we break this cycle so that we're not passing down generational regret like it's an unwanted heirloom. And that's what I want to unpack today. So grab your coffee, your notebook, or just a quiet moment, right? Take me on your walk or whatever it is. And this one's going to, hopefully it's going to make you pause and really think like it did for me. Let's cruise on in to the topic of the day: the great paradox of courage. Why we criticize the very life we secretly wish we had the guts to live. So we've all heard it before. I'm pretty sure. I would say 9 out of 10 of us. The 10th person, I'm not sure. Over and over, generations whispering the same words on their deathbeds. I wish I'd had the courage to live my life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And it's, the number one regret of the dying. It's, not the trips not taken, not the jobs not landed, not even the money that wasn't made. It's the courage, or more accurately, the lack of it, right? And yet, here's the maddening part about this: these very same people in the prime of their lives often mocked, criticized, or ridiculed those who did step out of line, right? The dreamers, the risk takers, the ones who left the safe job, they built the business, traveled the world. Like, somebody who has always just had, a silly heart and a vibrant personality, and they were spunky and, vivacious, and just being that person, being the silly heart, being, the weird one, for lack of a better word, or, chased what truly, set their souls on fire. And why is that? Why do people who end up with regret often spend so much time discouraging those who, might avoid it or actually follow, their dreams, right? And why do we as a species keep repeating this generational loop of longing, resentment, ridicule, and regret? And that's what I want to break down. So, the tension between safety and freedom, what is that, right? And so, humans are wired for survival. For most of history, survival meant sticking together, right? And if we strayed too far, from the herd, you risk danger, starvation, predators, even exile, right? It's like that community, that, your tribe, there was a reason why, you were all very similar and did similar things, right? And you didn't stray from that. And the problem is that wiring is still hardwired. It's baked into our nervous systems, right? And living a quote unquote safe life. That's the steady job. It's that whole like the default system of life. You're born, you go to school, you go to college, you get the 9 to 5, whatever, steady job, the business suit job. You get the 40 to 60 hours a week, right? And you work that until you retire, and then you retire. And it's like there's this default system of the way things are supposed to go, how you are supposed to live your life, and it's the house in the right neighborhood, the social approval, all of that shit. And it feels like survival, and it keeps us inside the circle of acceptance. But freedom has always been risky. And freedom looks like standing out, like not following the script, not following the herd. It's like exposing yourself to judgment, failure, and uncertainty. And here's the paradox: safety without freedom leads to stagnation. It leads to living a fixed life, right? And stagnation over a lifetime becomes suffocating. And it's literally the slow death that only shows up when you're old enough to look back and realize you've never truly lived, right? You've just been alive, but you haven't been living. And why do we ridicule the brave if it's the thing that we say on our deathbed that we wish we had had the courage to do? So if we're secretly longing for the freedom, you know, do we, why do we mock those who pursue it? Because their courage, what they're doing, even it's happened to me, leaving my teaching, working in education and leaving my education job, and after 19 years and stepping out, and among other things, starting my own business, and other things, right? Because my courage, their courage is a mirror. When someone leaves their secure job to chase a dream, it triggers something inside the rest of us, right? If they succeed, it shatters that excuse that it can't be done. If they fail, at least we can, we find comfort in it. People find comfort you know in that. It's like, see, I told you so. That's why I stayed safe. It's like pointing the finger and being like, you went and did that, and now look what happened. But I'm still over here like cozy and safe and living in comfort world, right? But their actions also shine a spotlight on our own inaction, and that's uncomfortable. So instead of confronting our own fear, we project it outwardly as a criticism, negativity, right? Whatever it is. And it's easier to ridicule someone chasing their dream than to face the nagging truth that we've silenced our own. So the generational loop, this is why the pattern repeats itself, right? Our generation lives cautiously, right? Pressures their kids to do the same, and then quiet. And I feel like it's gotten more so under the microscope because of social media, because we are fucking connected 24 freaking 7 to everything, right? And we see these people posting on social media their picture perfect little lives, and everything is like fucking Leave It to Beaver all the time, right? The pressures their kids to do the same, and then there's these quiet resentments, the ones who break away, and then on their deathbeds they're whispering, God, I wish I had been braver. I wish I had just done what it is I wanted to do. And, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. We should already know this, but all those perfect things that people post or talk about is not fucking perfect. Okay. Um, and the next generation hears it, nods, and then, they succumb to the pressure. And then the generation after that. And we're constantly passing this down because the pull of conformity, the weight of expectation, the primal wiring for safety, it's strong. It's got a grip hold on us, right? It's strong enough to override wisdom that's been handed down from the dying. And it becomes a generational echo chamber. Be safe, be sensible, don't stand out, until the end when regret finally breaks through. So the biology of regret, it's not just a philosophy. Neuroscience actually shows us that regret is one of the brain's heaviest emotional lows, and it lights up the same brain regions as physical pain because regret hurts. Regret has an actual physical reaction, right? And interestingly enough, we regret inaction far more than action. And a study published in the journal Psychology Science found that when people looked back at their lives, they were far more likely to regret the things they didn't do, the opportunities they let pass, the chances that they didn't take, as opposed to the mistakes they made by acting. So the deathbed confession isn't random. It's a deeply rooted human thing, right? Our brains are wired to feel the sting of what if more than the sting of I tried and failed. So, like, we don't want to live that way. We want no regrets. So fear is also disguised as wisdom, right? And another reason people, can ridicule or criticize or try to talk you out of doing, whatever it is, or being whoever, right? Those who chase their dreams, it's like fear dressed up as concern. It's like, and Eat at Joe's, it's a neon sign that's saying concern, concern, concern. And, how many times have you heard, are you sure that's practical? Maybe you should have a backup plan. That's not very realistic. What are you thinking? That's not going to go well. Do you have something else to do if it doesn't work out? What if you fail? I could keep going on, right? On the surface, these comments, they sound protective. They sound like you're being looked out for, right? But underneath, their fear, plain and simple. And fear, it could be because of instability. It could be coming from a scarcity mindset. It could come from, a fear of standing out. And fear loves company. Misery loves company. Fear loves company. Like if you leap, it threatens the very comfort of those who stayed on the ground. So they call it reckless, foolish, selfish, even when deep down, what they really feel is they envy you for having the balls to do it, right? Because it's only highlighting their insecurities in their life. So, how do we actually break the cycle? And that's the real question. And, how do we stop handling you know, the way that we are, and how do we stop handing this regret down like it's an heirloom blanket, right? How do we live so that when it does come to that end of time of our life, we can look back with peace instead of ache, right? So it starts with awareness, with noticing, when we're criticizing others for choosing differently, right? With asking ourselves, am I discouraging them because it's truly dangerous? Or is it because their courage exposes my own fears and insecurities, right? And it continues with choice, with daring in small and large ways, and to live a life aligned with who we really are. Now, some simple strategies, because I love giving away simple strategies, hot badger tips, all the things, right? To start living the life that you truly want to live. And I want to make this tangible. You don't need to burn down your life overnight, right? You don't need to make 855,000 changes in the matter of 2 seconds, right? Courage isn't always dramatic. In fact, most times courage is, quiet, steady, and it's incremental, right? It's the micro steps, the stretch steps, right? Um, so here are a few ways that you could begin to help you start making these small incremental changes. So get your pen, get your paper. If none of these work, I'm totally fine with that. Use it as a template, right? Maybe as you're hearing it, it strikes up other things. Write those down. Fit this into your life, right? All of our lives are different. So make this work for you. So first of all, listen for your own voice. Spend time alone. This is important because this is another thing people have a big problem with, is spending time by themselves, right? Away from the noise of social media, away from family expectations, cultural scripts, television, binging, your computer, even reading, just having some quiet time, and ask yourself, what do I actually want? Not what I should want, not what others tell me to want. What lights me up? What lights me up, like the Christmas tree in New York, right? Like the Rockefeller Center, those lights on that Christmas tree. What lights me up like that, right? Write it down and then say it out loud and claim that shit, right? Start with small acts of rebellion. If you want to write one page a day. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just write it. If you dream of travel, start planning a weekend trip. Start planning, maybe it's a day trip somewhere, right? If you want to build a business, dictate 1 hour, or not dictate, dedicate 1 hour a day. Small steps are going to compound into great momentum, right? Notice the critics and then translate their words, right? When someone says that's not realistic, what it could actually be translating to is, I'm scared and I don't know how to face my own fear. Their words are about them, not you. It's like, the four agreements by, oh my God, it evades me right now. um, and then the four agreements, he talks about that. And one of the four agreements is don't take things personally, right? They're putting their feelings onto you. It has nothing to do with you at all. It is 100% about them. Find expanders. Number 4, your fourth hot badger tip: surround yourself with people who are already living courageously, right? Borrow their belief until it grows stronger. And then expanders, they prove what's possible. That's the proximity principle. That it's fail proof. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Are they expanders? What's the average of people who are dream chasers and living to the highest standards? You're going to be the average of that. Or are you with the people who are the critics and, the regretters and, not living the life they want? Well, you're the average of that. So where do you think you're going to be if with either group, right? Practice deathbed clarity now. And what I mean by this is regularly asking yourself, if I were at the end of my life, would I regret not doing this? If the answer is yes, that's your signal to move, right? Okay. And the final hot badger tip that I'm going to give today, this is like 2 bonus badger tips, right? Anchor in your body. And I mean, fear lives in the nervous system. So learn practices, breath work, meditation, grounding, movement, that help you calm the noise so you can act from clarity as opposed to acting from a place of panic. So here's the raw truth. Most people don't live the lives they truly want because it's easier not to, right? It's easier to follow the script. It's easier to blend in. It's easier to keep safety over freedom until the end. But you're not most people. If you're listening to my podcast, you are one of my peeps in the Badger community. You are not most people. You're listening to me. You're hearing this. That means you're questioning. You're noticing the paradox. And that's the doorway, right? That's you putting your foot in the door before it closes. And living your own life, it's not selfish. It's the only way to actually leave this world without regret and to leave the world a better place, right? To help people, to offer services to help people become better. And when you do, you won't just free yourself, you'll crack the generational loop for those who come after. So the next time you hear the voice of criticism, whether it's outside or it's inside, your noisy roommate, remember this: courage is contagious, and your bravery might just be the thing that gives someone else permission to live it too, right? So maybe, just maybe, if enough of us choose to follow that path, to follow our path, we'll finally collectively break the cycle. So don't wait until your deathbed to wish for courage. Choose it now with one small act at a time. All right, my friends, that's the kind of conversation that lingers long after you hit stop. And, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate, every time you listen. Leave a comment. You can scroll if you're on Spotify. There's a comment section. You can email me at grittyglitterbadger@gmail.com. I love all feedback. The more feedback I get, the more I'm able to bring you things that hit, right? And if this episode hit home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need the reminder. Because you never know who's standing on the edge of courage, waiting for permission to leap. And sharing is caring. And if you loved what you heard today, follow the show, give me a 5-star rating, drop a quick review. The more stars we get and shares that I have, the further this message can spread and the more people that I'm able to support and encourage. And don't forget, you can subscribe to my free weekly newsletter at grittyglitterbadger.com for even more good, juicy stuff. I have a blog. You get first tips on when I drop new exercise programs and everything. And it always has that no BS Badger energy. So let's all keep moving forward and living our life with no regrets.